Right, greetings, hello. It's Dr. Thomas Daffern here for my weekly Sunday broadcast, and it's rather grim time we're living through yet again. I mean, gosh, when Buddha taught, he is reputed to have turned the wheel of Dharma, which got things moving a bit. I wish more of us could be turning the wheel of, the new Dharma. We need to do a Dharma update to get the planet enlightened again. That's the purpose of these talks. It's funny, when they're on YouTube, it normally comes up with Eckhart Tolle after me, so it looks like there's just him and me doing this. We need more people to turn the wheel of Dharma. Unlike Eckhart, I'm focusing the kind of consciousness revolution that he's talking about, but I'm trying to apply it to global problem solving. And boy, we have a lot on our plates. We have the COVID thing going on, and I'm going to talk about that. Now we have the horrors of Gaza, Israel, Palestine once again erupting into, war, mayhem, and mass killings on, everyone involved, and random mobs running around in towns in Jerusalem and so on, in Israel. So I'm going to come on to that as well. I've got things to say about all that. And my thoughts go out to everyone that's a victim of this violence on all sides. I want to start with the COVID-19 crisis that we're facing, because that is astronomical in its consequences. In India, every day, there are as many people dying as died in the whole of 9/11. That's over 3,000 people. And I feel passionately about finding out what caused 9/11. I've written a book about it. I'm a historian of that whole 9/11 business, and that's horrendous. But, as many people as died in that are dying every day just in India at the moment. What? And where did this come from? So I feel deeply, like everyone else, we're all traumatized by this. And I've done an awful lot of research over the last year thinking about this. As you know, because I've been speaking about this, I've tried to get the international community to wake up and realize that we have the means to solve the cause of this by referring the matter to the UN for its inspection of all militarized labs that could have made this thing under the International Bioweapons Convention, which was signed in London in 1975. One of the few bits of peace diplomacy that British ever really, succeeded in getting off the ground. And so that should have been pursued. And if I'd have been foreign minister or prime minister, I would have done that day one. Any national government could do that. But there's a sort of conspiracy of ignorance going on this planet, is the only thing I can say. And I've called this Sophia-phobia. It's like people don't want to face up to the possibility of wisdom because they're I don't know, is it they're afraid they might get martyred or killed? Most wisdom teachers, like Socrates, Christ, whatever, end up being killed, In Sophia-phobic violence, the mob is the destroyer of people of wisdom, and historically that's always been the case. But we have to stay one step ahead of the mob, living here in a little sleepy village in the middle of France, the mob isn't too restive around here, and I can go on teaching, thank God, because also I live in a very civilized country in France, which are used to intellectuals, and they had their mobs, but by and large the mobs have, now realised that it's better to sublimate your collective aggression or whatever to intellectual work and to cultivating your own garden, as Voltaire said. So anyway, that's all a preamble to say. I want to announce the wonderful news that I've taken the initiative as director of the Peace Studies Institute that I run and the World Intellectual Forum that I run here in Europe, in the name of those two bodies, to initiate, with colleagues' help, what's called the International Commission of Inquiry into the etiology of coronavirus 19, COVID-19. ICI, AOC, it's a simple acronym to remember. But it's got huge implications. You see, I've been waiting for someone else to do this, and I've reached the point of my patience has run out a year later and nobody's done it. There were various attempts to set up commissions, and we had Sasha Stone and other people, creating what looked like impressive coalitions of inquiry, but none of them really honed in on the question of etiology. Now, I know as a medical doctor that etiology is the first thing you want to find out about a disease. If you're treating a disease like cholera or AIDS or whatever, you need to know where it's coming from, what caused it. And you need to treat it in a way that solves it at source. So with cholera, somebody worked out it was coming from a polluted water pump, and that was the beginning of epidemiology, the sort of scientific study of outbreaks of pandemics and epidemics and so on. And because I'm an expert in the history of medicine, among other fields, I've taught the subject at Oxford and London universities, and I've worked a lot in research into the history of medicine. It's a fascinating field. I did a pioneering course, I think the first course probably in world history, on the history of all religions and their approach to healing and medicine, back in the 90s at the University of Oxford. And when I say all religions, I mean, I looked at not just the Greek, the Roman, the Celts, the Hindu, the Chinese, but I looked at Babylonian, Egyptian, Phoenician, and all the kind of medical systems, because they're all really interesting. And they combine both scientific approaches to medicine with a more spiritual approach, which is, I think, the way to go. I'm a great believer in a joined-up approach to medicine. I also worked in hospitals for a sum total of, 5 years in London and Canada. And I worked within the medical system. Thought of training as a medical doctor, and then decided I'd be more use as an academic looking at planetary healing. So the work I do as a philosopher, as coordinator of my institute and so on, is really planetary healing. So, okay, COVID-19, vast problem. So our commission is going to look just at the etiology, the causes. There are two main sub-schools of that, although there are variants within it. One is that it's a natural occurrence. It was an evolution mutation from a bat virus, jumped through various animal hoops and got to humans. Natural thing, that's it. That's one theory. And that theory has not been actually properly, well, I'll come to that in a minute. No, let me say that the WHO, which put a team of people to go into China, interviewing everyone just a month ago, tried to make sense of that theory, which is the main thing promoted by China. And there isn't a path. They haven't been able to find, which animal, where. They can't construct a credible genealogy or etiology of the disease using that path. They say it's likely, but there's no actual definite proof. Okay, the other main hypothesis is that it was actually engineered. Okay, it started out as a bat coronavirus maybe, but then it was tampered with. It had gain of function research done to it, and that made it much, much more lethal to human beings. And that was deliberate. That was done, in a lab somewhere by people that knew what they were doing, and they spliced in certain changes to the normal coronavirus to make it much more lethal. Now that's hypothesis 2. That again has variants. So, who did that, when, who paid for that research, was it leaked by accident, was it leaked by design, where did it leak from? Those are all variants of that number 2 hypothesis. The WHO did look at that briefly in a few paragraphs, but it didn't really go into it thoroughly, and it had no teeth. It couldn't actually ask for hard, concrete evidence which would either prove or disprove that hypothesis. And so we're still in the dark. Now, many scientists are just beginning to jump up and down, coincidentally with the launch of the commission, saying, hang on, this is really important actually. 3 million plus people have died on the planet. 3,000 are dying every day in India. And what do you mean? We don't know where this came from? And some people are saying, don't even look at hypothesis B. People are beginning to smell a rat, and there's discussions going on in the US Congress. Unfortunately, that's become a political thing, so senators like Rand Paul are happy to ask questions, but the Democrats aren't asking because, that's tragedy. It should be, this question of the etiology of coronavirus is absolutely trans-political. You should want to know the truth of this, whether you're a conservative, a liberal, an SNP, a Republican, a Democrat, or a communist, I would say. If it is gain of function research, which was paid for and bought by American capitalism, using Chinese scientists, then that's shocking, and any genuine communist would want to know the truth about that. Because such knowledge should not be put to military purposes. We have to outlaw biological weapons research. And if that's what this is a spill-off from, we need to know that as a planet, and we need to outgrow this misuse of knowledge for militarization. And so I've spent my life fighting against the militarization of academia on campuses, in research institutes, and the way that academics are privileged. If you work in military or military science, you get vast amounts of funding. I think is utterly wrong. So the root of this is a scandal about the privileging of military research against peace research. Peace research is like Cinderella. We have hardly anything. We have a few scattered institutes around the world which get a pittance, in comparison to the military. So the commission that I've launched and will chair and is open for submissions of evidence, will be contacting everybody that's, flagging up there may be something to look into here. And a number of people have gone public with this. There have been some very courageous discussions in television channels. It's becoming more mainstream. The Washington Post has run articles, Australian television, and some reputable science journals are now flagging up, hey, we don't know the etiology of this disease. Okay, so that's where the commission comes in. And we will be working with colleagues to find out. And anyone that has, serious evidence, either way, if you want to say, well, we know it was leaked from a bat, and this is the path, and it came via, this route, send us the evidence. If you say, no, we think it came from bioweapons engineering and it was first found in Saudi Arabia, then it was made in Canada, then that was taken to Wuhan, and that's another theory that's floating out there. If you have evidence, then send it in and contact me. There's a document about the terms of protocol of the commission, and I'm happy to send that out. This is a public commission for the public good of humanity. I'm one of those intellectuals that feels that intellectuals have a duty to actually work in the common advantage of all humanity. This is something that's affecting us all. It's not, I don't care what your politics are, what your religion is, what your nationality is. This is a human concern. So that's the first thing I want to announce. I think it's, like everything, it takes effort, time, discipline. And, I'm going to keep going with that. Okay. And we are focusing on the etiology. Other groups can campaign about how to treat it, which vaccines, whether vaccines are the right route, whether they themselves have dangers, etc., etc. And those are really important conversations. But our commission will focus on the etiology. Right, now I want to come and talk about the tragedy of the Middle East and what's going on in Gaza, Palestine, Israel. Okay, so I love that part of the world. I've been several times. I love the landscape, the people, the towns, the history, the heritage, the culture. I walked on the Sea of Galilee, the shores at sunset. I've walked, the coast. I've been to Caesarea. I've been to Palestine. I've been to Bethlehem. It's such a sacred place to me, as it is to all Muslims, all people who've surrendered their ego to the absolute. It's sacred to all Christians who should have done the same. And it's sacred to all Jews who should have done the same. We should all be brothers and sisters sharing this sacred land. That's my vision of the opening of the Golden Gate. Suspending judgment on, let's stop fighting Messiah wars. Let's open the gate and just open it to God. And let's be brothers and sisters together and celebrate that with a sort of collective messianic consciousness that we need, the Matrianic consciousness, as I also call it. But anyway, that's the vision I pursue, as you know, if you listen to my talks. And that's the sort of application of the Eckhart Tolle kind of Enlightenment approach to the geopolitics of peacemaking in the Middle East. We have to get agreement, a peace treaty between these religions and all the peoples and cultures that live there. Well, we're a very long way from that, aren't we, at the moment? Because we've had this horrible, ridiculous battle of Temple Mount that was going on when Israeli Defense Forces went in heavy-handedly and started smashing up people in and around the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I mean, it's as if they're deliberately inflaming the situation. I have no idea why they did that, apart from deliberately to whip up trouble, so that Netanyahu can look like a big boy. I mean, that's one kind of conspiratorial theory. I don't know who monitors and who polices the police in the Israeli Defense Forces. Somebody should investigate what on earth that those people thought they were doing, roughing up a spot in Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa. 300 people were injured. I mean, can you imagine, like St. Paul's Cathedral at Easter? Police go in and beat people up and 300 people get injured. Women, children and men. I mean, what kind of a state would you have to be living in where the police or the army are unleashed on worshippers at St. Paul's Cathedral? We're not there yet, but to be honest, if Priti Patel is allowed to get away with what she's planning, we're almost there in Britain. And it's the same kind of mentality that I'm right, and you're wrong. I'm good, you're evil, so I'm going to clear you off the streets. I just don't know what the thinking was behind that army provocative action. But it was a disaster, and there should be a national inquiry in Israel. Somebody in the Knesset should initiate a complaint. That's the way to do it constitutionally, against whoever was in charge, whoever gave the orders to attack the Al-Aqsa Mosque, And that person should be reprimanded. Those protocols of command should be reviewed and reformed. You see, the trouble is that people that know they've done wrong, in a sense what they all do is they escalate it up to the next level of crisis. But no, and this goes back to etiology. My concern as a conflict resolution specialist is to find the origin of the conflict. That was a key origin. The other thing was, of course, the pressure being put on Palestinian homes to relocate and to move out so settlers can move in. Now, again, that's needless provocation and totally wrong. And the world community should make a stand against it. The flashpoint with Hamas in Gaza was they gave a deadline to the Israelis who were roughing up people at Al-Aqsa Mosque and said, leave Temple Mount, leave the mosque, or we will start firing rockets. They gave warning. But of course, Israel's military and militarized government actually wants Hamas to fire the rockets. And I'm sorry to have to say this, it's bad news for my dear Israeli friends who believe in their government. But they actually want it to escalate so that they can then go in hard hitting, bomb Gaza again, and justify their continuing oppression and control of the Palestinians, it's like the policeman with his neck on George Floyd. He daren't lift it up because the guy might get up and, you know, do something naughty. So you keep it down, I mean, until he dies, in the case of George Floyd. It's a horrendous situation. I think my friend B.M. Jane explained this in his talk to the World Intellectual Forum last time about his book Geopsychology, which is a new theory in international relations, that we should look at the psychological dimension of actors in international conflict and, yes, you know, bring it on. This is what William Bloom said in his PhD, it's what I said in my PhD, it's what B.M. Jane is now saying. We have to look at the psychological dimension because these states and these would-be states like Palestine are not necessarily rational. Israel is not in the hands of rational statesmen and women. The days of Golda Meir and Yitzhak Rabin and so on, these are gone. We now have irrational people who are working for naked self-interest. They have a sort of narcissistic personality, and one of the features of narcissism is that it reduces everything to one's own monologue, one's own worldview, and all rival perspectives are discounted. And I would say that this is a problem, you know, in terms of geopsychology, and it's part of how can we unlock, how can we get people to see the other person's narrative? Well, okay, it's a big thing. So I happen to have contacts, friends on both the Palestinian and Israeli side. My Institute of Peace Studies has both Israeli and Palestinian colleagues involved, as does the World Intellectual Forum. And I want to share with you an email I received from my Israeli coordinator. And she lives actually in Herzliya, which is, you know, just north of Tel Aviv. And this is what she said, and I want to share this because it shows you how an intelligent, highly educated Israeli person is looking at the current situation and what they feel. Dear Thomas, there are so many things in this world that need the correction and the attention of scientists and politicians. Regarding what is happening in Israel and the military operation against the terroristic attitudes of the Hamas in many levels, that needs a big explanation in order to see the full picture. One has to distinguish between the Hamas organization or movement and the uninvolved Gaza civilian people. Israel and the IDF are doing it in the highest possible level in the circumstances. They attack those buildings that serve as headquarters or official offices for the Hamas leaders, or storage places for rockets and ammunition, electronic communication devices for terror, etc. That has been done after giving them 3 warnings and 3 hours to evacuate the building. Unfortunately, it's the Hamas who doesn't respect the life of its citizens because they use them as a human shield, knowing that Israel won't attack them in surprise. They use also schools, mosques, hospitals, flats, etc. for this purpose. And then they lie to the world, pretending that those are only civilian places. The world should have been wiser by now and not to keep falling the same story while the media keep reporting it. So is the case of El Aqsa. For months, if not years, those who run the place have been storing all kinds of weapons, homemade building blocks, fireworks, Molotov bottles, etc. Everything they can think of and can be used as a weapon to throw on the Israelis, who come for praying in the Western Wall, or the police who are trying to keep order. I think she's talking about the Al-Aqsa Mosque here, up in Jerusalem, and claiming that there are all kinds of weapons being stored there. During the whole month of Ramadan, there's been unrest and attempts by young Muslims to cause distractions. There are attacks on individuals, Jews, on the streets of East Jerusalem, riots against the police, throwing building blocks at them, etc. There was information that was going to be a big provocation or revolt at the day of the annual celebration in Jerusalem. So there was a need to prevent it from happening. The mosque was never in danger. Those who came to pray were in danger of a pogrom done by the Muslim mobs, who were calling cries of Libach el-Yahud, meaning slaughter the Jews. All that atmosphere is the work of Hamas cells and individuals throughout the social media calling them to protect Al-Aqsa from imaginary Israeli invasion. The idea behind it is the wish of Hamas to appear as the saviour of the mosque and Jerusalem. The previous month, there were going to be elections in the West Bank, and it was estimated that Hamas will win them over the PLO. The elections were cancelled at the end, so Hamas has wanted to make the case anyway. No democracy will allow a terror organisation to run the life of a country, and that's exactly what Hamas has been working on, igniting the fiery emotions of the young Muslims to take over, protect the mosque. That has always been a good mantra to march the Muslim mobs along the streets of Jerusalem. However, that was not enough. They planned for us riots and revolts in all the mixed cities of Israel, Jaffa, Akka, Lod, Ramleh, Haifa, etc. Jewish people are afraid to leave their homes. The Muslim mobs are shooting into their homes or lynching them in the streets. New pogroms on Jews in the streets of Israel? Exclamation mark. Hamas shot rockets on the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, while the members were gathered in the memory of Second World War on Monday. How about that? I don't know what the international media have reported to the world. So when I say that I don't see a solution, I mean that for the Hamas, the only solution possible in their eyes is to send us all back to Europe. Their ultimate solution is to rule over all Israel. How about that? Why not? In the name of democracy and human rights, we will give the Muslims our country and we'll all jump to the sea. How about that? We will let the Hamas take over or rule us with its terror actions and the help of the free world. And you think the Christians would be accepted as their allies? Think again. You are the kafirs as well. Your time will come as well. You think that I'm exaggerating. Every place that Israel, by trying to please the world, withdrew from, it turned out to be a terror region. Thus, the south of Lebanon and the strip around Gaza. So will be the situation in the West Bank if we play according to democratic rules like you wish. No democracy would establish there but another terror region run by Hamas. Next in line will be Jordan. Lebanon is already under the hands of Hezbollah. Why not? Let's try it too. Just to remind you that Assad is still in power with the help of Iran and Russia. So I wouldn't jump into criticising Netanyahu and Trump, although that is the in thing to do now. When Trump was in power, new thinking arrived. The Abrahamic peace agreements have opened new horizons and a new future in the Middle East, and for relations between Israelis and Arab countries. Those who seek to live peacefully, Muslims and Jews in Israel, have started integrating and collaborating, even in politics. However, that's exactly the worst danger in the eyes of Hamas, that we will have normal, peaceful life in Israel between Jews and Arabs. There would then be no need for their dark intentions to conquer the Israeli state. They can only exist if there's war around. So they have to keep the religious cause very well alive. The result of this philosophy is what we see now. Nice peace talkings are signs of weakness. One needs a big stick above the head in order to maintain a sort of temporary quietness. In short, they aren't interested in peace with Israel. They want us swinging out into the Mediterranean Sea back towards Europe. Just to remind you, the same thing happened after the Oslo agreements. As soon as Rabin had signed them, the buses in Israel started to explode, and we had many casualties everywhere and every day. Sadly, when peace starts to appear on the doorstep, the opposite reaction takes place. That's the human situation. unless something unusual like some big natural disaster or something even worse like COVID-19 takes place, we are still trapped in this matrix of the fallen angels. Humanity has still a long way towards the light. It was a long answer. Today is Israel's 72nd anniversary according to the Gregorian calendar, and tomorrow is the festival of Shavuot and the celebration of receiving the Ten Commandments in Mount Sinai. Maybe it will bring us closer to the Messiah's peaceful days. Amen and amen. Right, so I wanted to read that out because, it's well written, and it represents a kind of a way of thinking which I imagine probably most Israelis feel. And she also said in some other emails that she's writing as rockets are sounding in the sky. She can hear rockets from Hamas falling on cities around her, not as yet Herzliya. So in her view, and I think this is shared, as I say, by most mainstream normal, non-activist Israelis, is that it's all Hamas's fault. They're a sort of dangerous terrorist organisation who are literally trying to kick Israel out of its territory and kick them all back into the sea. And this is obviously reinforced by the media, and this way of thinking will have come from watching endless news items about this. And every time Netanyahu opens his mouth, that's the same message. If it's not Hamas he's grumbling about, it's Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, or it's Iran, which he sees as the mother country of all these terrorist groups. And it's a continual rhetoric of hatred and fear. I mean, what is underlying this is fear, in my friend's case. And I mean, my friend is the descendant of Holocaust survivors, so she knows from her parents' stories, what it was like to suddenly have her parents shipped off to Auschwitz as young children, which is what happened to her. And she wouldn't exist if they hadn't have survived Auschwitz as young children. And that's a story that many of these Israelis who are sheltering from the rockets coming over will know. They know about this. Okay, so that's that side of the story. Now the other side of the story, which I'm also in touch with, is how the people of Gaza see this situation. Now I have another friend who lives in Gaza and who I've been in contact with, I interviewed recently, and who is a bright young graduate, and who I hoped would meet with a peace envoy that was coming from the Church of Scotland to Gaza just a few weeks ago. And what was interesting is she refused to meet him. Why? I discovered that the reason is basically because to be seen being active for peace was somehow not kosher. It was, that to be cool in Gaza now, if you're a Muslim, is to be active in the resistance. And she was, although she supports peace and supports my institute, she was hesitant to be seen to be doing too much for peace, because the powers that run Gaza are much more interested in resistance and victory. I got the feeling that the way this young woman saw things was that, no, that's sissy to be for peace. I mean, we're oppressed and we have nowhere to live, we're conquered, we have such sad lives, and you want us to be for peace? No, we've got to be for resistance and victory. And I thought, I could sense from the exchange of conversation that was the thinking.